All right, we are live. Welcome to another episode of Monday Night Live. 10 Horse Monty, JB.
2 weeks in a row, I'm on time. Look at that.
Yes, sir.
Love
Yes, sir. And on the other end, we got Cory Weaver. And
how's it going?
It's going great, man. Like we were saying in the backstage. Appreciate you coming on with such short notice. And you were starting to talk about how you still have a busy schedule, even though your tournament stuff is winding down. So what do you do in the off season?
So in the off season, I don't really have an off season. I'm also an avid ice fisherman. So I'm fishing year round. Whether it's open water or hard water, I don't stop. And I also own a business in the fishing industry, JB's Fish Sauce Fish Attractant. So it's show season. There's a lot of ice fishing shows coming up, along with some open water shows coming up. And so we stay busy.
So I got a question about the ice fishing, because for one, it absolutely sounds terrible to two guys from southern Missouri here.
Yeah.
But are you the ice fisherman that goes out in the hut and sits there and
No,
fishes? Or are you the one that goes out and fishes like you would be in your boat? And
I'm as active as I am in the boat. I am nonstop on the go. I'm drilling 200 to 400 holes a day and putting the electronics to work, and I'm nonstop on the go.
That's awesome. Now, when you say 200 to 400 holes, how far are we going? Are we going on like a sled, or are we going walking?
Depends. Early ice, obviously you're forced to be careful. You're walking. I have great gear. I got float suits and all the good safety stuff. So you're doing a lot of walking, and as the season progresses, you can move up to ATVs once the ice starts getting thick enough. And then later on in the season, we actually get enough ice up here in northern Iowa, and I go up to Minnesota and Wisconsin quite a bit. Eventually we start driving our trucks on the ice, and I'll camp out on the ice for several days in my truck. And
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a different lifestyle.
I gotta ask.
I could do it though. It'd be fun.
Have you ever had to use that float suit?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And actually, crazy story, just last fall, about this time coming up, I also do quite a bit of kayak fishing, and I'll kayak fish right up until ice on. We have several good lakes here that have an awesome wiper population, as well as big crappies, and I'll go out there and vertical jig for them right up until ice on. And I was in my kayak with another YouTube friend of mine. We were fishing, and I had the biggest wiper I've ever seen hooked, and had it beside the kayak. Of course, this is not easy to land these fish in a kayak with no net. And he came off right next to the kayak and just stayed there. He didn't realize that he was free. And I reached over to try to swoop him in, and I have some back issues. My back wasn't strong enough. I just rolled right off the kayak into the water. The water is about 35 degrees.
Ooh.
And float suit did its job, popped me right back up. I was able to climb back in the kayak. Unfortunately, I lost my electronics. I lost a couple rods. It was a costly day, but
not as costly as it could have been.
Yes. And I was crazy. My suit's good enough. I stayed out there and fished another 4 hours.
That's freaking hardcore, dude. Wow.
So yeah, is it completely waterproof then? Like, if you go in, it keeps you dry?
No, it's not a dry suit. I was wet, but the material is good enough. It'll maintain your body temperature.
Okay.
And I decided it was a great day to test. It was a new product last year, so it was a great day to test how long it would hold up in the conditions. I wasn't very far away from my truck. I had another friend there. I always carry spare clothes, blankets, all kinds of emergency supplies in my truck, because this stuff happens more often than you care to think about. And so I wanted to test my equipment and test myself and see what I could do. And I ended up fishing the rest of the day.
Wow. I understand that because
but I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah,
I would
I'm a
not
waterfowl
recommend
hunter,
that.
so I get the keep carrying extra clothes but I'm not that hardcore. If I get wet, if I fall in the ice or anything like that, I'm out. I'm done.
Right. But yeah, I've been through the ice before. It's not fun. But I also have 40 years of experience dealing with it and conditions, and I don't panic. I know what to do in the situations, and it's just my lifestyle. I'm a diehard fisherman and have been since I was in diapers, and it's never going to change.
yeah.
If that's the way I go someday, I can't think of a better way to go.
You're doing what you love.
Yeah, that's exactly the same thing I've told my wife. If I go fishing and I don't come back, just know that I went doing what I loved.
Right.
So, yeah. So before we got on here, I kind of posted a question: what's working for you now, as far as what lures are working for the people that are on the chat? And we got Tony Green in here. He said a little jig here at Lake of the Ozarks. Daniel T says over the weekend nothing was working.
I like Barry's answer. Barry's answer's coming up here.
Darius said a Ned rig down on Kentucky Lake. Barry said earthworms are working for him in Western Kentucky. Hey, a little sneaky,
you
man.
gotta do what you gotta do sometimes.
That's right,
man.
You gotta get that tug every once in a while, just for whatever, however you gotta get it, right?
That's right.
Richard says flipping a compact jig on wood and dragging a 1/2 ounce football around. See what else we got here. Yeah, the real Devin said fishing was tough this weekend. 90 degrees and the fish were in a funk. It's still kind of it's still been kind of hit and miss around.
I tell you
here.
what, the air temperatures were nice this weekend, but that little cold snap that we had, I guess, what was it, Tuesday, Wednesday last week?
Yeah,
it plummeted our water temperature like 10 degrees.
Yeah,
which I was happy about. I needed to see that.
Yeah, we faced that down at Sam Rayburn. We had 2 nights that dropped down to 36, 35 degrees. The lake temperature ended up dropping almost 10 degrees right before the start of the tournament. But even without those cold snaps, every year everyone gets all excited for that big fall bite that's coming. But truth be told, early fall is probably one of the absolute toughest times of the year to fish. The fish are scattered out. There's no consistent patterns for the most part. It's just not quite happening yet. We get excited for the fall, but man, this early fall can be tough.
I will tend to agree with you on that. You can be a hero one day and a zero the next day. I mean,
absolutely.
My team partner, he had another tournament to fish on Saturday, so I fished with my dad, like we were talking about before the stream or before we went live here. And he went on Sunday, and you did too. Same lake, probably fishing a lot of the same stuff, and neither one of them did very good. Where we had a better than average day.
Yeah, and I was staying away from what I thought the fish were doing, because I've said this before on the stream, but as a content creator, I try not to do the same video. Like if I catch them a certain way a couple times, I try to go over and catch them a different way. And catching them a different way wasn't the way to go yesterday. I should have been doing what I knew they were biting. So I had a really tough day. I only caught a couple.
Plus, fish. That's also the best way to learn. I mean, if you just go and do what you know is working every day, you're not necessarily learning something new. You're just catching fish instead of experimenting. True. What else can I do to trigger these bites in these conditions this time of year? There's always something else working. It's just putting that puzzle together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took me a couple weeks to figure that out, and that was one thing that you talk about. I learned, I've been forcing a bite for a month and a half now.
Yeah, I've been waiting on it,
and it hasn't been here, and it finally showed up a little bit last weekend and a little bit this weekend. But I knew I was in a tournament, and it's like, got to put it down. You got to do something different.
Yeah,
that's the hardest thing for me to do in the fall, because I know that if I'm looking for a big bite, there's about 2 things I'm going to do.
Yeah,
so,
I bet you know this guy right here. Chris says Vienna sausages have been working for him.
Chris,
he's a fellow Opens angler.
I tell you what, Chris had a strong showing the last couple of weeks.
He's been on fire, man.
Yeah, so those that don't know, I actually sponsor Chris with my company, and then we're also really good friends. I travel with him on the open circuit, room with him. I practice with him. He's a heck of a guy, and he's one heck of a fisherman. I learned a ton from him. The Vienna sausages is kind of our running joke because I think they're absolutely terrible and nasty. But truth be told, they're probably the most famous snack for tournament fishermen out there because they're easy to take along.
They last forever.
Right, they last forever. I mean, they're like army food. They just don't die or go away. But I can't stand them. But he likes them, and so that's always been kind of a funny running joke with us.
You know, I just can't get past the smell. I know
they are stanky, man.
We're supposed to be talking about fishing, but we were fishing it was a regional, and it was just bitterly cold that day. Raining, wind was blowing, and my boater was like, "You got to eat to stay warm." And he pulls out like a package of crackers and Vienna sausages, and he's just like slinging the jelly out of them. And I'm just in the back, just
you about to throw. I'm
gagging. It's awful because I'm downwind and I'm just catching all of that. It's
worse than garlic spray.
And
terrible.
I've tried several different. You know, they have multiple different flavors. I've tried several different ones. I mean, if I absolutely had to, I can eat anything, but
yeah,
it's definitely not my first choice to pack in the boat. I can tell you that.
I'll take a peanut butter and jelly over that any day of the week.
Yeah. If you're down in Florida and you go aground and nobody can find you, then maybe you'd have to eat some Vienna sausages to get you through the night.
Well, if you're in a survival situation, I'm sure you can catch some catfish or something on them too. So
that's true. they would definitely smell it and come in.
I had to be a little crappy tonight. And that would be just fine with me while I'm out there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. See, yeah, we had Russ 25. He said 25-mile-an-hour wind gust up to 30 on Table Rock this weekend. Stayed home and flew a kite instead. I don't blame you, man. That's part of the problem yesterday out there.
It was
we fished out of like 16-foot aluminum boats, and man, it was ridiculous. You really couldn't. You kind of had to fish where Mother Nature would let you fish,
and that was even a challenge. We were fishing one of those spots that were out of the wind on Saturday. Wind hit you and just spun you around.
Yeah,
gust would come. And here you went down the bank.
Oh, I lost my hat. I was standing there. I was going back that creek, and all of a sudden a gust. You know, and I even had my hat down. I was kind of casting like this. I had my head down, and that wind hit. My hat shot up like 15 foot in the air and landed like 20 feet behind the boat and just flipped upside down. Of course,
did you get it?
I got it.
Okay.
But I was like, man, I didn't see that coming. I had it kind of cinched down tight too.
Old Sam Rayburn got rough last week too.
Oh, I bet. That's a big lake.
Yeah.
Big lake. So let's dive into some of that. Before we do, just remind everybody out there in chat, if you're watching and you know somebody that is a co-angler, whether it be the BFLs, the Toyota Series, the Bassmaster Opens, or they fish team tournaments and they find themselves in the back of the boat, shoot them a text, let them know that we're on this stream, because this guy right here is the best for this year in the Opens division. So give us a little background. You said you're from Iowa, is that right?
So I currently live in Iowa. I've been out here for about 10 years now, but I'm originally from northern Indiana, born and raised just outside of Fort Wayne, Indiana, up in the northern corner. I grew up fishing all over Indiana, Michigan, a little bit in Kentucky. I think I fished my first tournament when I was 15. And never looked back. I was instantly hooked. But I grew up fishing and hunting my whole life. My stepdad had me fishing and hunting since the time I could walk, and I've just been in love with it my whole life. But I grew up fishing a lot of small local stuff and then some regional stuff. Joined a bass club when I was 16, did that for a couple years and fished like the top 8s and stuff, and fished some federation tournaments, and then really just got hooked on the competition and the local money tournaments, and then moved up, started fishing some regional stuff like the NBAA, Angler's Choice, Midwest Outdoors, and some regional circuits like that had national championships all over the country, and had some success in that. And that's what I did for many years. Back when gas was cheap enough, you could actually make some money fishing smaller events. Plus, it wasn't always small. Like here in Iowa, we don't really have the lakes for large tournaments. A lot of our tournaments are 20, 30 boat tournaments, which are fun. But with the rising cost of everything, they're almost not worth fishing unless you're just mentally going into it, just going to have fun. You're not gonna see a big reward for your efforts in those size tournaments. Back home, we had a lot of 100, 200 boat tournaments, which is what I really enjoy, between the competition aspect and you actually got a little something to fish for. But the little small ones are still fun. That's what I grew up on. Even fished a lot of 3-4 hour weeknight tournaments. I mean, when I was younger, before I had kids, I was fishing 5-6 days a week, whether it be weeknight tournaments, every day on the weekends, anything I could find, I was in it.
Heck yeah. I mean, that's a lot like what we fish around here. Is, I mean, the biggest tournament is probably Egypt.
Yeah,
locally,
maybe 50-60 boat tournaments are kind of
that's
not the biggest
the
ones
top
on these lakes,
end,
but these are like 3,000 acre lakes. They're not that big,
right?
So
USA Bass and Angler's Choice, that's kind of the
couple
circuits that are around
local clubs that go Wildcats and charity events, stuff like that.
And the Angler's Choice, that's been a strong thing for many years now.
For sure.
I'm glad to see that's still going.
Yeah, they have a good championship event.
Yes.
At the end of the year.
Good job. I mean, even for us around here, like, we have Angler's Choice on the lake that we were talking about. It's a spring through the summer circuit, but I mean, 20 boats, and you can, obviously splitting it, but probably walk away with $1,800 to $2,000, $2,500 to win, depending on the number of entries and number of guys that get in the side pot. But
what is it, 150 to get in?
I think it's 200 a boat to get in.
200 boat to get in,
plus side pot. So
right,
they only play down a couple places,
and that's what you got to get into to get the little bit bigger prize pots. Those $150, $200 plus tournaments. We got a lot of those little $30, $40 tournaments, which are fun, but you just know going into it, you're probably going to lose money even if you win.
We both walked away with $10 extra.
Right.
We got our winnings back this weekend for getting third place. So it was like, at least we got our money back. But
but you had fun and you're on the water. Yeah. So
it's the memory spent for me with my dad. So that's even better.
Yep.
So what you're fishing? You fish the Opens division. How many years have you been fishing the Bassmaster Opens?
This is only my second year. So I actually when we moved to Iowa, my kids were fairly young. I actually walked away from competitive fishing for about 11 years and didn't compete in any tournaments from the time I left Indiana and moved out here to Iowa. Needed to dedicate more time to home, family, kids, work on being a good dad and husband. And so I walked away from competitive fishing, and my kids are getting older now. Got 2 in college and 1 more to get graduated here in a couple of years from high school. And last year I really started getting the itch again. I'd started getting more involved in the fishing industry, working with a few companies, and I fished 4 of the Opens last year, and then I fished all 9 this year.
Okay.
And then I also fished some other local trails. Yeah.
What'd you jump in the Opens versus, say, a BFL or a Toyota Series or anything like that?
Mainly because a lot with Chris Bougeri, who we were talking about earlier. I knew him. He's fishing them. He's been planning his whole life to use this platform to get to the elites, which is the only way you can get to the elites now. And I'm a life member of Bass. I've always enjoyed Bassmasters. And it was before I jumped right back into, I didn't want to jump right back in, try to go full blown to the pro side. I wanted to get back into the swing of things, meet some more people, get used to the travel again, learn some lakes I had never fished before. And it was just a great opportunity. I had someone to travel with, share expenses with, pre-fish with, learn from, even though I have years of experience, our minds think differently and approach things differently. So I'm constantly learning from what he's doing and what we're doing in practices and whatnot. We have a lot of similarities and we have a lot of differences at the same time, and that's one of the best ways you can learn, and that's what I chose to do.
I think it's great to have two people in the boat. It can benefit the co-angler and it can benefit the guy in the front of the boat equally as well, because I have a practice partner when I fish the BFLs in the Ozark division, and he's a jig guy. He's always throwing a jig. So I know if there's a jig bite,
I am too.
He's got it covered, man. So I don't even need to throw a jig. But
Yeah.
if he wasn't throwing a jig, I would have to be wondering if there was a jig bite. So I'd need to be throwing a jig. Where when I'm in the back of the boat and he's in the front of the boat, I can like focus on trying to figure out a different pattern or a different bite.
Right. And we do a lot of that in practice. I mean, especially in practices. I mean, it makes zero sense to be throwing the same thing. You learn a lot more with both guys doing and trying different things in the same situation. And it's a mutually beneficial thing. But obviously the relationship has benefited me more than him. I mean, he's going to do what he's going to do anyways. That's just how it works on the pro side and at these events. That's the hardest part of being a co-angler. You have no control over anything. You're just along for the ride, and you got to figure out how to adapt and how to catch a fish doing what someone else is doing, or in that situation. I don't ever like to do the same thing someone else is doing, and that's a big key to success on the co-angler side. So
definitely, we got a bunch of questions loading up in here.
All right,
I'm gonna kind of touch on them before we move down. Brock says the air quotes great fall bite. Does it happen before or after the lake turnover? And then Stephanie kind of piggybacked on that, and she says, I've always heard of the fall feed. I've never witnessed it though. A Texas biologist actually said there is not scientific proof that it exists. So what's your thoughts on the good fall bite, before or after the turnover, or just kind of through the whole thing?
Definitely after. That kind of brings up a funny topic. So Todd Castledine, I don't know if you guys have heard of him, had a great video this week while we're down. We got hit with those cold fronts down at Sam Rayburn, and all kinds of people were complaining about, the turnover is killing the bite and this and that. And he had a great video on, we as fishermen are always looking for an excuse. It's the turnover's fault that we can't catch fish, or the moon phase, or whatever. Sometimes it's just tough, and we got to do a better job. There's always fish biting somewhere, biting something. And sometimes it's just harder than others to figure out that puzzle. It's easy to make excuses and blame it on things, but it comes down to, we got to do a better job of figuring out that puzzle. But there's always fish biting somewhere. And as tough as Sam Rayburn was last week, there were guys that hammered them pretty good for the conditions and for as tough as it was. And, there were pros that blanked both days. So, I mean, but I definitely think the best I like the late fall bite myself. Like I was saying earlier, I think early fall can be one of the absolute toughest. That late summer, early fall is probably the toughest time of year to catch fish consistently.
Yeah,
I would agree. I think you need a weather event that time of year, whether it's a front. You need something to activate those fish.
Right.
I mean, the best time to go around here will be tomorrow.
Right.
And we're getting a monster rainstorm tomorrow, and I guarantee you, I debated calling in sick tomorrow because they're going to be chomping tomorrow. I don't care if it's thunder and lightning, wrath of God, Babylon stuff. They're going to bite tomorrow.
Right. And a lot of it this time of year comes down to just covering water. One of the things that makes it so tough is that the fish are so scattered out. They're not grouped up. You're not going to find 50, 60 fish schools this time of year. You're going to find 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s. And so you don't have that same competitive feeding instinct to trigger and rely on once you get that school fired up and triggered. There's not enough fish anywhere right now to consistently. You're not going to sit in one spot and catch 20 fish. It's just not going to happen this time of year. You got to be moving and covering water. And
I think there's going to be windows this time of the year. And, and we saw it this weekend with the bait pushed in the back of the creeks. You're gonna start seeing that the back of pockets, back at creeks. They're gonna the bait's gonna show up, and when the bait shows up, the bass aren't going to be far behind.
True.
They take them longer than we expect as fishermen, but they're going to come quickly.
Did you scan by the second island? Did you scan to the north of that?
Not yesterday.
You ought to see how many shad are there. It's ridiculous. I spot locked there, even though the wind was blowing like 35 miles an hour and I was casting a spoon. There are freaking.
Did you catch any there?
There's like 5 acres of shad right there.
Really?
It's stupid. So all those shad that were in that center section of the creek,
they're gone.
They're pulled out there. That's where they're at. And there's fish. There's fish in them. I couldn't get on yesterday.
We experienced that in Texas at Sam Rayburn last week. I've never seen so many shad and bait fish in one lake in my life. That was my first time to Sam Rayburn, but sometimes it makes you scratch your head and think, how can we ever catch a fish when there's this much bait? There's this much real bait in this lake. How do we ever trick them into biting?
No doubt. Yeah. So talk about Rayburn a little bit. How did start, like, kind of break down the tournament a little bit? How did day one go and on into day two? And
so we got to Sam Rayburn. It was, early fall. It was warm. It was in the 80s when we got there. Massive cold front came in during the week. Like I said earlier, it got down into the low to mid 30s at night. It was constantly changing things. Fish were all over the place, but it was very tough. It was very evident even before the weather came. It wasn't what you expect when you're going to Texas, to one of the greatest lakes in the country. In your mind, you're thinking, man, I've got a chance to go catch a PB. I'm going to go jack some big fish. It wasn't like that at all. It was very tough from the get-go. Day one, I drew a young crow that decided the only consistent bite he could find, and it wasn't even consistent. It was actually so you get your pairings the night before and you kind of call and make your plans on where you're going to meet up and all that good stuff. And I call him, and the first thing he says is, "You got the worst draw you possibly could have got." And that's not something you ever want to hear as a co-angler, but so I kind of chuckled it off because I enjoy a good challenge anyways. And he's like, "But we're going to be fishing shallow all day." And we did. We went back up a creek, and we basically were fishing mats all day. And you basically only had two choices all day, and that was punching or frogging, and the frog bite wasn't happening. So, and that's very tough as a co-angler. I said earlier, I never like to do the same thing that the guy in the front of the boat's doing. But when you're in that situation, there's literally nothing else to do. So I think some of the keys when you're in that situation, you're punching behind another pro that has first access to all the juice, so to speak, is to really pay attention to where they're flipping and making sure you're not hitting the same holes, the same spots. So I work on two things. I try to get my bait in the water more often. I use eye rods, and I use a 8-to-1 gear ratio reel when I'm punching. Not for just for I can get my bait back in faster and get another pitch in. So in my mind, I'm trying to hit 2 to 3 spots in the time that he's hitting one, is the approach and the strategy that I use. The more spots and the more times I can get my bait in the water, the better chance I have of getting a bite. Especially with the cold front, it became very obvious early that the fish were sitting all the way at the top under the mats. Like, you either got bit as soon as your bait fell through the mat, or you didn't get bit at all. They were suspended right up under the mat, and so that played right into my wheelhouse. I love punching anyways, but when they're sitting that high and it's that immediate of a bite, man, I can just go to town and hit as many holes nonstop as I can. I ended up catching, I think, 6 keepers. Unfortunately, all the fish that were up in the grass for this time of year were mostly small fish. I think my best 3 ended up weighing 512 for day 1, which had me sitting in 29th place.
You guys only keep 3 in the opens, right?
So in the opens, co-anglers only get to keep 3. The pros are keeping 5 like normal. The co-anglers only get to keep 3, which makes it even tougher because that just puts all the weights that much closer. You know,
because you caught 5 keepers.
I would enjoy a 5-fish format more, just because it helps spread it out a little more. But on 3 fish, I mean, when you got 200 guys, that's really packing those weights tight and keeping everybody right there. It makes it a lot tougher for sure.
Well, a little more luck is involved at that point.
Yeah, especially at a place like Sam Rayburn. A guy comes in with a 6-7 pounder, along with a couple line burners, or a guy comes in with 2 5-pounders. That's a huge obstacle to overcome for a guy that's just catching 3 keepers.
And the guy that's catching say a guy that's catching 2.5 pounders and caught 6 keepers like yourself, he caught 6 keepers. And then the guy that caught the big fish may have only caught 2 other small keepers to go with it.
Yeah, he caught 2 fish all day, but he was still right at the top of the leaderboard.
What did it take for 2 days to win on the co-angler side down there?
I believe it was like 13 pounds, 10 ounces. It was not great.
So there, the guy on the boater side second day caught 2, almost 10 each, right?
What's that?
It was Logan Latuso.
He had that 30-something pound.
Yeah, he had
so we got to
watch over 9.
He had a 31-pound bag. We got to watch that go down a little bit. He had a 9.15, I believe, and another one over 9, and another one over 5, all in a very short span.
Well, what I was getting at was, you catch 2 of those and you won the tournament.
Yeah, if you're the co-angler, you catch 2 9s and a 2.5 pounder.
Yeah, you won the tournament.
Yeah, in one day.
Right. I mean, even to catch 1. I mean, and that happened to me last year. My very first tournament last year on Pickwick. Day 1, I drew Matt Robeson, which is an ex-NFL, the Vikings player. Lives down in Texas now. Owns the tackle shop there on Sam Rayburn. Great guy. Down on Pickwick, day 1, about 45 minutes into the tournament, I hooked a 613 out of the back of his boat and won big bass and cashed the check. That was the only fish I had day 1, and I had some small fish day 2. But having that big fish was huge.
Yeah. So day 1, you back to punching.
Uh-huh.
Are you punching with? Are you a braid guy? Are you fluorocarbon guy?
I'm using braid in grass. I'm using braid. If I'm flipping in wood or brush or anything like that, I'm using fluorocarbon just because braid will really cut into wood, get you snagged and hung up a lot more often, cause you to lose fish more often. But yeah, when I'm punching grass, I'm using 60-pound vicious no fade braid. And I got the rig here that I was using. I don't know if I can get that up close enough, but
Hold on a second.
I use 2-peg bobber stops, and I got a 1 ounce Picasso Lures tungsten flipping weight, gunmetal flipping weight, a 5/0 Hayabusa straight shank heavy duty flipping hook, and then this is just a creature bait from Drastic Plastics, a small soft plastic bait company that I work with. I was using black and blue and in the mornings when it was darker conditions, and then as the sun got up high, I would switch over to green pumpkins and more natural colors. You had about 2 foot of visibility, not quite 2 feet of visibility down there. The water conditions were about perfect. Had a little bit of visibility, but it wasn't so clear that you had to worry about line size or all that good stuff.
What size weight did you say you were punching with?
This week I was using 1 ounce. I'll go all the way up to 2 ounces sometimes, and I'll go as low as 3/4. I usually start out in the 1 ounce range and I'll experiment back and forth. I'll go a little lighter, a little heavier, depending on how thick the mats are. You know, you got to at least be able to get straight through. I don't want to be fighting my bait getting through. I want to know when I drop in that bait's falling through. Because when you're punching, it's all a reaction bait. Those fish aren't seeing and studying that bait. It's dropping through, and you get it in front of their face, and they're just reacting and biting it. They're not studying it. They don't see it. It's just 100% reaction. So I want that bait falling, and I don't want to have to worry about it hanging up in the grass and fighting it back and forth. So I'm using a heavy enough weight that it's just going straight through every time. I don't have to worry about it.
How deep a grass were you punching? Like how much water was underneath that grass?
Anywhere from 3 feet, which left about 2 feet of water under the grass, all the way out to there in Sam Rayburn. You had grass mats growing all the way out to the edge of 10 feet.
Wow.
Nice.
So you'd have 7 or 8 feet of water under it. But that sweet spot that we were in most of the time, usually it was 3 to 5 feet of water.
Okay. So when you're punching, do you throw a little bit of slack in your line? Like say right when your bait hits the top of the mat, are you kind of pulling up and giving it some slack, or do you try to keep it tight?
No,
you were saying they were.
So I've been doing it long enough. I keep my reel super loose, and so you're very much on the danger zone of backlashing every time, or that weight's heavy enough. It's pulling that line off so fast. It's just dropping straight through. I don't want any slack in my line because, I mean, like I was saying earlier, literally it's instantaneous. As soon as that bait falls through the mat, they're on it, and you're setting into them. So I'm right-handed. I reel right-handed. So I've had to learn to flip with my left hand, even though normally I'm casting right-handed and switching hands. When I'm punching and flipping, I've taught myself to do it with my left hand so that I'm always in the ready position. It's flipping through, and as soon as it gets through, if I don't get bit, I pull it up. Since I knew the fish were up at the top of the mat, I let it fall through once, and I pull it up, and I'll kind of yo-yo it for just a second right up against the bottom of the mat. Sometimes I get a bite doing that too, and then I'm right out and pitching into the next hole. I wasn't yo-yoing 4 or 5 times and waiting for one to see it and come get it, because that bite just wasn't happening. They were right there under the mat.
Yeah, so you got to be, when you're doing that, you really got to be in tune with your bait. If they're hitting it they're hitting it right when it punches through, because a lot of times with a punch and bite, it's not like it's usually not a thump. It's they just kind of hold it, or it just kind of gets heavy or mushy. At least that's the way the bite is around here. A lot of times you don't get a real pronounced bite.
So you experienced both there. Some of the fish, I mean, if you really got it right in their face as soon as it came through, it was like they were cracking it with a baseball bat. And
Nice.
But most of the bites were that mush weight sensate, like your bait just stopped dropping. There's just a mush feeling, a weight difference feeling. And you really had to be keyed in on that.
So back to the tournament. Day 2, how did your day 2 go? What were you doing in that day?
So day 2, I drew a terrific young man, Tristan McCormick, who had just won Hartwell. He was sitting in 4th place going into day 2 there on Sam Rayburn, and awesome guy. Had a lot of fun with him. Learned a lot from him. But what he was doing is a co-angler's nightmare. So he was 100% live scoping suspended fish that were chasing bait balls out in anywhere from 25 to 45 feet of water, and trolling motor on high, chasing these, because these fish were just nonstop moving, going all over the place. So trolling motor on high, chasing these fish down, making 1 or 2 casts to them, moving to the next group. And that is tough. That is tough for a co-angler. And
so how did you approach that day then?
So my approach was
eat some Vienna sausages.
I wish I would have been better prepared, maybe asked a few more questions. But these guys know that I travel with Chris, and so I try to be very respectful. I don't ask too many questions. I basically ask deep or shallow, and are we going to be doing it all day? Do I need to prepare for both? That's pretty much all I ask. I don't ask too many specifics, just because I kind of have my own game plan. I don't want to get in my head with what they're doing, because I know what I need to do is going to be different from what they're doing anyways. So my only regret after realizing how we were fishing all day is I'd literally the night before taken all my jerk baits out of my bag. Because I asked deep or shallow. He said deep. Well, 99% of history tells you you're going deep. You're fishing offshore structure, drop-offs, brush piles, all that good stuff. So that's what I prepared for. And luckily, I kept I kept all my drop shot baits in because I enjoy drop shotting, and I had some success practicing with the drop shot. And I kept a couple of my small finesse swim baits with me. And that's what I relied on all day, was a drop shot and some small finesse swim baits. But I really felt like after analyzing the day, it only took me a couple of hours to realize I really wish I had some mega bass jerk baits I could have triggered a lot more bites and gotten those fish to come farther if I had a jerk bait with me, but hadn't done it all week, didn't see a need for it. And then lesson learned, usually I always at least leave a couple of my favorite ones mixed in my box with my crankbaits and topwaters and stuff like that. But I took them all out and didn't have them, so I had to make do with what I had.
I saw real quick, I kind of piggyback off what you just said. I did this as a co-angler. You can't take it all, right? You just can't take it all. And a lot of times you end up taking stuff out of your bag to put in your boat when you're at home, and you might forget to put it back in your bag. I mean, you go through and you pack meticulously, but there's almost always something that you forget to put in your bag, whether you take it in the vehicle with you to the hotel and you don't load it in the bag, or you're going through it the night before the tournament and you take that one thing out. When I was at Pickwick fishing the BFL regional just a couple weeks ago, my boater was catching, we were on an underspin bite, and he was catching them on a 3.8 in sight flash. And sight flash is that's my favorite color. That's my favorite color swim bait, and I always have sight flash in my bag. Well, I'd taken them out for, I don't know why. I don't know where it happened. I think maybe I was just throwing an underspin here locally, and I'd taken the packages that were in my tackle bag out and put them in my boat or something. But I had Pro Blue, and I had like a pearl white. They didn't want those. They wanted that sight flash. In fact, the guy I was fishing with, he had a Ranger 521, and it was white and silver, and we named it a sight flash by the end of the tournament because it was working so well. But it's just like you said, that bait that you may need. Sometimes, unfortunately, you take it out of the boat. And then with the live scoping, I saw a very unfortunate co-angler during that tournament. His boater was live scoping this point. It was a secondary, like it was a long point, but it was a shorter, little small point back in the kind of the center of this cove.
Yeah.
And his boater caught like a 5. We saw him catch a 5. And this boater was on a butt seat watching live scope, and he was flipping a little spoon out there in about 40 foot of water. Yep. He had his co-angler all the way turned towards the bank, fishing in like 6 foot of water. Yep. And this guy we worked up and down this bank, the secondary points. We worked up and down this bank like 3 or 4 times. We'd work down it, and then we'd idle up and start over. And then after that, we went across the lake to where I could still see that point. And that guy stayed on that point for at least an hour in that same position, just flipping his little jig and spoon out there. And that co-angler, I'm sure the co-angler went through everything in his box. Yeah. And like you said, it sucks.
That's a good time for a big old heavy Carolina rig and bomb cast that thing as far as you can throw it. So
what'd you do with Tristan? Did you hook up with some fish behind him?
Yeah. So I only caught 2 keepers. Caught a lot of shorts. I had a big fish take me into a brush pile. He was kind enough to take me up there. We messed with it for over 5 minutes. I could still feel the fish on there. It's just sawing and digging deeper into the brush pile. He was more than gracious. Like, we're not leaving this fish, and it just kept getting buried worse and worse. I was using a drop shot, spinning tackle, which I throw my drop shot on 15-pound no fade braid and to a usually anywhere from an 8-pound to a 10-pound leader. Sometimes I'll go up to 12 at places like this where I know it's bigger than average fish. The water clarity doesn't really matter too much. And if I'm going to be fishing around brush, so I was using 12-pound test, so I wasn't worried about breaking fish off. I wanted to be able to keep them away from the brush as much as possible. I wanted to be able to horse them a little bit. And which Chris, the guy I travel with, actually cued me in on that. Was like, you might want to consider upsizing to 12 this time, just in case you get in that scenario. And sure enough, it get buried. We messed with it for 5 minutes, and finally, he didn't want to leave it, but I felt obligated. He's got a lot more on the line than I do. How long can you mess with a fish buried in a brush pile?
Yeah.
I think if I was a boater, I could have eventually got that fish out, but it probably would have took 10 or 15 minutes or longer. And who knows, might not. I finally made the judgment call. I broke it off myself. You have that's part of fishing. Move on.
It was a catfish anyway. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. But I went 3 hours that morning without a single bite. To be honest with you, my head was kind of starting to spin a little bit because my wheels are always spinning anyways. There's got to be something I can do. So I ended up catching my first keeper on a little, just a ball head jig. I have these custom made by a local guy, buddy of mine, backyard bait shop, just a 3/8 ounce head with a small hook so that I can throw a small finesse swim bait. This was actually, I ran out of the small one. So this was a 4.5 incher that I actually cut and trimmed down myself to make it a little bit less than 3 inches. Caught quite a few fish on that. Caught my first keeper on it. Also caught quite a few fish on an underspin with a finesse swim bait. This is a Picasso Lures underspin, 3/8 ounce head with a small
What's up with that
hook to
arm?
match up.
That
What's
oh,
that?
okay. Yeah, the spinner, the arm that the spinner's on. That's just
Yeah.
okay.
So if I take it off, it's just a collared one that you can add to any swim bait head that Picasso offers with theirs. So it's just a rubber arm, which I like. I like the action you get out of these versus some of them that have the stiff metal arms. It's got a very unique action underwater. So I really like those. And paired that with a small, I caught quite a few fish, and I ended up no, I caught my other keeper on the I probably had 6 or 7 shorts on that, never hooked up with a keeper this time. But my second keeper and the 2 big fish that I lost came on a drop shot. And here's the bait and the rig.
Awesome.
It's just a 4-inch robo worm in a shad hologram color. These fish were really keyed in on small bait fish. So I had been out deeper in brush piles. I was using some other worms that are a little bit more traditional for Texas and Sam Rayburn. But these fish that we were chasing that day were really keyed in on the small bait fish. So I went with the small 4-inch shad colored with, and I like the Texas rig 'em. This is a 1/0 straight shank Hayabusa hook. That I really like for Texas rigging my drop shots, especially around brush and other things to keep it weedless. And I ran out of my heavyweights. The heaviest weight I had with me was Picasso Lures 1/2 ounce tungsten ball weight. I was using cylinder weights. I like using more around brush piles and grass. It seems to come through a little better, or the teardrop shape. But I ran out of all my heavy ones. So the heaviest ones I had was the 1/2 ounce. And at the end of the day, I was kind of scratching my head thinking I should have tied 2 of them on at once because we were moving so fast. And in that deep of water, I had to get my bait down as fast as possible. But a little trick, something I've had a lot of success with the last couple of years that I grew up doing before we got all these fancy electronics. If you happen to get a boater that is gracious enough to leave his grass on, if you can talk them into leaving their 2D or their down imaging on, I'm literally video game fishing in the back of the boat. And I've caught a lot of fish, cast quite a few checks, and really been able to take advantage of that. Which is how I grew up before we had live scope, before we had 360 and all this great technology. I grew up on a flasher and then to a generic 2D system, and I learned how to video game, is what the most popular term for it is. I learned how to video game fish when I was pretty young, and I've gotten really good at it, especially now this last year and a half of being a co-angler. But I'll be honest, I'm not a great co-angler. I don't enjoy being a co-angler. I was doing this for the learning experience and seeing some new bodies of water and really just preparing to make that jump back to the pro side and see what happens here in the future. But that's a really good thing you can take advantage of if you're able to get a boater that's willing to leave his grass on. Some guys will, some guys won't. And you just have to adapt and take advantage of what you can.
I actually had that happen in a BFL. I was doing the same thing that you're talking about. Video gaming off the back of the boat, and I caught one, and my boater turned off the graph pretty quickly.
He snubbed you.
He snubbed me.
Right. Well,
You already let that fish
I
go
think
by.
most of them, especially, I have found the more success and the more experience pros that you draw, they understand that they're not fishing for that fish anymore anyways. They already had that chance. They're already moving on to the next fish. So they don't care if you catch a fish that they went past already, because they got a million more options in front of them. And a lot of the guys, a lot of co-angling is how you start out the day and how you start that relationship, either the night before on the phone call or that morning as soon as you get in their boat. Getting on the good side, making it a fun atmosphere, making sure that they don't feel like you're trying to compete against them. Respect their water a little bit. Don't push them too hard. The more friendly and fun you can make it, the more relaxed you'll find these pros will be. And they take, especially a lot of the good ones, they take a little bit of honor and pride in their co-anglers doing well behind them as well. That's not their first priority. And I think I've seen a lot of posts on some co-anglers and stuff that have had troubles over the years. Oh, well, my boater was terrible. He wasn't on fish, or he wasn't on that, or he never let me fish anything. Part of co-angling, you have to understand these pros aren't there to be your guide. If that's the experience you want, you need to go hire a guide. A lot of co-angling is you're going along to learn and hope to try to do the best you can to catch fish behind them, but you are fishing behind the pro. So
here's this kind of ties into what you're just talking about. Russ Williams says, ask Cory how much comes into play with drawing a boater that puts you on fish versus one that doesn't, and did that have anything to do with you winning the co-angler of the year?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of luck involved in that for everyone, like we've talked about. But it all comes down to, you can say they didn't put you on fish or you weren't around fish, but that's not always true. Sometimes you're around them and just didn't figure out how to trigger those fish to bite. And sometimes you're just not around fish. That does come into play. It definitely affects us some. There's a lot of luck, I will say, involved in co-angling. But I think there's a lot of skill and a lot of concentrated effort that creates your luck based on your approach to what you're doing behind that pro.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there are some days where the boater just his rotations may be a little bit off, or he just didn't really get on anything in practice. That happens. But there's a lot of days where you're around fish and you have to make the right decisions. Like what you just said, being out there with Tristan, that's a tough situation. You got somebody that's live scoping, or if you got somebody that's fishing isolated.
Right, and it's not just live scoping, because I mean, if a guy's live scoping brush piles in 15 to 20 foot of water, but he's targeting specific targets, there's going to be some scattered roaming fish close to the bottom, that you can access and actually fish for in a normal fashion. That to me is not a negative at all. I embrace that. But fishing for those suspended fish out in the middle of nowhere, that's a whole lot tougher.
Yeah, but you were mindful enough to make a few bait changes and kind of think about what you had to work with instead of getting spun out and paddling back and having the day go by. I think one of the toughest situations that I've found myself in before is fishing behind somebody that's covering a lot of water really tight to the bank, that's really moving down the bank, say square billing, like a 45-degree angle. How do you approach that when you're in the boat with somebody that's doing that?
So there's a few things you can do. It really depends on how tight they're doing it. You get in a lot of tournaments where You got guys that are fishing down the bluff wall. Well, the boat's almost touching the wall. That's the only way. I mean, that's how they have to fish. So I'm fishing behind the wall, whether it be a jerk bait or a swim bait. And basically my approach is I'm bomb casting as far as I can behind the boat to give those fish time for that boat to go by. And they're not as leery to the boat. They haven't just seen his bait or my bait. I'm bomb casting as far as I can and understanding that if I get hung up, I'm not even telling them. I'm breaking off and retying. And it doesn't matter if it's a Vision 110 $25 bait or if it's a cheap little swim bait. That's just some of the sacrifices you got to do, or dragging the Carolina rig. Carolina rig will save you in a lot of situations. But if they're throwing a crankbait or a moving bait working pretty fast, sometimes I'll go to a heavy jig and I'm just hitting as many targets as fast as I can and looking for that reaction bite. I'm not even really fishing or working that jig in a normal fashion. I'm just trying to create that reaction bite. And I think a lot, like for us, we only need 3 bites a day. I don't need to catch 60 fish to win the tournament. I need 3 bites. And the other tournaments, you need 5 bites. You don't have to have 20 fish a day to have a good day. You're looking for 5 bites or you're looking for 3 bites. And I think accepting that in your mind, you know, most people think, oh, we got to whack them all day and call and call and call. No, the most important part of being a co-angler is just getting your limit. It doesn't matter if they're all just keepers. If you catch your limit every day, you're going to cash a check 9 out of 10 tournaments.
Yeah.
I don't care what size your limit is. If you catch a limit every day, you're going to cash a check in 9 out of 10 tournaments.
Daniel says, do you prefer the Vision 110 or the 110 Junior?
I throw a lot of different jerk baits. I'm not a huge Mega Bass guy. Definitely not sponsored by them. I think the Vision 110s and the Junior, it depends on the bait size in the lake. You know, are you fishing a herring lake? Or are you fishing a big threadfin shad lake? Or do you have a lot of thumbnail shad, a lot of tiny, a lot of times you want to match the size of the bait that they're feeding on. So I use both quite a bit. Truthfully, I think the Vision 110s, the Juniors, all the Mega Bass, they're great. But I think they're better in colder water. I think there's equally as good or better jerk baits in slightly warmer water. I don't throw them year round. I don't think they're necessarily better year round, but they definitely are in colder water.
What's some of your other favorite jerk baits?
Oh, Strike King, some old school Rogues are still players that most people are forgotten about.
We'll just let them be forgotten.
Yeah. You know, I've got a lot of old school baits still that I throw that aren't made anymore. I'll be sad the day that I lose them or break them. But I experiment with a lot of different baits.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That Rogue, I started, I mean, we all started out on a Rogue, but I kind of put them away. And then I started fishing them again last year. And they have such a unique action. They're just like total different bait.
They do. Especially the older ones. They're not made exactly the same anymore. There's a slightly different action to them. I still like the originals better, but the newer ones are still good. And definitely have their time and place.
So JP's talking about packing as a co-angler and how difficult it can be and to stay organized. Now, is there a limit in the opens of the tackle that you can bring, the number of rods that you can bring?
There's not a hard set rule. They recommend you bring 7 or less, which I would recommend bringing 6 or less. I mean, truthfully, if you look, there are guys that have actually made a living as co-anglers. And if you watch them, they probably all bring 4 rods or less. And usually 2 or 3 of them were spinning rods. I think one of the biggest keys is having rods that are versatile, that you can use for multiple applications. I got a 733 medium heavy eye rod that I can throw a rattle trap on it if I need to. I can throw a square bill on it, a spinner bait on it. Having rods that are versatile like that and you can use for multiple different techniques, and all you have to do is retie, I think is more important than trying to have a rod for everything that you think you might do. Because a lot of times your rods are getting beat up and tangled. You got the small slot there on the side to put your rods in. You're running down the lake in rough water. Co-anglers' rods take a beating, bouncing off of each other, bouncing down the lake, getting tangled up. So yeah, less is better. That's for sure.
I can agree with you on that. That was a hard lesson I think both of us learned that.
Oh yeah, we trashed several of the guides on our rods.
Yeah, trashing guides, trashing, just having too many. Like you said, you get there and you got, even if you have 6 or 7 rods, that's a lot of rods to maintain. And when you got one little small space to strap them all down in, and you're flying down the lake, one bait comes unhooked, it's sitting in the side of your leg, and
it's always the rod with braid on it. For some reason, that braid like gets a little play in it somehow. I don't know. Or the A rig. If a boater says we're fishing A rigs, I'm like, oh Lord, because that's a mess on the co-angler side.
That's what I use, the bait wraps on my braid rods.
Yeah,
so I don't have to worry about them coming off like that. They'll at least stay in that bait wrap.
This looks like a good story. Can someone ask my day one co-angler from Hartwell for gas money, please? You weren't Chris's day one boat co-angler, were you?
I was actually.
And, oh, that's funny. That's
and so we always split everything all week long, and I caught my limit with him. I had a small to decent limit. I think I had like 512 that day with him, and we were joking. We're coming off the water. I said, well, my guide sucked today. He's not getting paid. But we always settle up. We always settle up at the end of the week because we're splitting rooms. We're splitting food and all that good stuff. We settle up at the end of the week. But yeah, I told him I wasn't paying him that day. My guide sucked.
How cool is that, though? I mean, your travel partner, you get to actual fish with him. You practice with him all week, and then day one, you just get another day with him.
That's an easy day on the water.
Yeah. But it's actually it was almost, I don't know, it was different. It was fun, but it was also kind of nerve-wracking because he's got a lot on the line and he's going to make the elite soon. And I don't want to be a distraction to him. That's when I started doing this with him and traveling with him. That was the number one thing I told him when he invited me to start traveling with him is I don't want to become a distraction. Yes, I'm a small business owner. I sponsor him a little bit. We're friends, but I don't want to be a distraction to his big picture that he's been preparing for this his whole life since he was a kid. He's won a lot of big tournaments. He's very big in Kentucky. A lot of success at Kentucky Lake and nationally. My biggest thing is I don't want to be a distraction to him, but I've learned a ton with him. We have a lot of fun. We're always giving each other crap and talking trash, and practices are a lot of fun. But yeah, no, it was fun. It was a great experience. Yeah, he's still not getting his gas money. Terrible guide.
That's like the one boater where you didn't have to say, what are we doing tomorrow?
Right.
Because you've been fishing with him all week.
Right. But that is a key to being a co-angler that I'll tell you. Breaking that ice early, the night before, I always ask my guys, can I bring ice for the boat? Is there anything I can bring and help out so you don't have to worry about it in the morning? As soon as I get in the boat in the morning, introduce, get stuff put away, I'm handing him gas money first thing. I'm handing them a couple of my products. Anything I can do to loosen them up and make them feel non-threatened by you, because there's a lot of horror stories out there about co-anglers that actually approach it like they're competing against a pro that day, and that's the last thing in the world you want to do. You're never gonna have a good day doing that.
So that's always the big question. What's your etiquette for gas money?
To me, with today's rising costs on everything, I feel like $50 is the minimum at these pro level events.
Okay.
These guys are spending, just that day alone, they can spend up to $150 or more just in gas. That's not counting oil. That's not counting the wear and tear on their boat, insurance, everything else. I feel like $50 is a minimum. If we're on bigger lakes and we're making 70, 80 mile runs, and I know that gas bill is going to be higher, I'm going to up that.
Yeah.
But I feel like, technically the going standard is $40, but I feel like we've kind of gone past those days with the rising cost of everything. I feel like $50 is a good starting point.
I say when gas is around that $2 price point, $40 is fine. Like,
yeah,
when it gets up there to $3 and $4 a gallon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
not to mention the price of diesel.
Yeah.
No doubt, man.
Why would they leave the depth finders on for you?
They're usually trying to conserve battery power most of the time. I mean,
that's kind of an old myth these days with the lithium batteries and stuff now.
Yeah.
Battery, they're doing something wrong if battery power is an issue for them.
Right.
But yeah,
I've heard
hear that a
interference.
lot.
I've got interference a lot.
Yeah.
Most of them just don't want you to just look at their waypoints. They don't want you to take something back home.
Right. Which is another trick for guys, if they do get in that situation, it is legal to use mapping on your phone. You can open up Navionics phone app and at least have an idea of where you're sitting on a point,
Okay.
If you don't know the lake that well, okay, well, shallow water's this way, deep water's that way. Most circuits, that is legal.
I didn't know that.
You're not allowed to be texting. You're not allowed to be on social media, but you are allowed to use it for mapping purposes.
So what are some of the other questions you ask, like on the phone? I mean, me typically, I'm trying to ask. I like to know how far we're going to run. I'm not saying exactly where we're going to run. Are we doing like a longer run or a short run, just to get my mind right? And a lot of times, especially if it's going to be cold in the morning, I'm going to put on a rain suit or an extra layer if we're making like a 20-mile run or something.
Right. That's what I was just going to hit on. I want to know, same thing. Are we making a run? Because even if it's 70 degrees out, if the wind's blowing 20 mile an hour and you're bouncing in 5-foot waves, you're probably going to get wet a lot during the boat run. So I want to, even if it's supposed to be 85 and sunny and no chance of rain, I'm probably still bringing my rain gear if we're making a long run on a big lake that has rough water. I'm asking deep or shallow. Like I said before, would they like me to bring ice or something like that along? And most of the time, that's pretty it for me. I stay pretty vague. I'm really big in the research and studying. I do all my research and study ahead of time and kind of know the different situations I need to be prepared for based on history and based on that time of year. That's the one great thing about today's technology is the information is endless out there now if you're willing to look for it and willing to study it. Whereas we didn't have that years. When I was a kid, you were reading magazines. Now I can go find several hundred videos on any lake that we're going to and tournament history. And so I'm pretty basic. I don't ask a whole lot of questions. yeah, I don't want to get too many things in my head. I want to have my own ideas and approach to how I'm going to handle the day based on what he might be doing.
Gotcha.
Chris says that was the fastest limit that you ever had that day.
Or what was the fastest limit?
I think we shut the boat down at 7:29. I think I had at 7:20. I think I had my limit at 7:29.
That's a good feeling, isn't it?
So how did that happen? I mean, wow, that's crazy. Topwater?
It was a pretty good school of fish.
Okay, obviously.
It was a pretty good school of fish, and there was a lot of fish roaming, so I was able to video game them like crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This is a good one right here.
Yeah. Chris says, without saying any names, do you have any good stories about one of your worst boater experiences you've had as a co-angler?
Yes. And I'm not going to say names.
Understanding.
It was Chris, but we're not going to go there.
No, it wasn't Chris. It wasn't Chris this time. No, I drew a boat. I'm not even going to name the lake just because it'll kind of give it away if anybody goes back and looks. But I drew a guy that had a small, old boat, much older boat, not well taken care of. I go to step in the boat to start the day, and literally all the carpet on the back deck is covered in moss and dirt and oil. And I step on the boat, and all the carpet just slides all the way across the back deck. And I'm like, oh, wow.
Wait a minute. Was this in an Opens?
Yes. In
Really?
a Bassmaster Open pro level event.
Holy cow.
I step into a boat, and all the carpet is peeling off the back deck, and we're getting ready to go onto a big body of water that gets rough. And I have a bad back. So right away I'm like, wow, that's concerning. So, oh yeah, I gotta get that fixed. As long as you stay close to, which I always ask for no seat because I don't like it taking up the space. I want to be able to move where I need to. If I need to sit down and give my back a break, I'll sit down in the regular seat. I don't like having a seat back there. I'd rather have the open space. Well, that's been reinforced. So as long as you stay there close to the seat, you'll be all right. Well, then I take another step in the boat, and my foot goes through his live well lid. And I'm like, what the heck, dude? And yeah, I gotta get that fixed too. And
was there already a hole there?
No. And so I get my stuff down, I get my stuff put away, and mentally I'm kind of annoyed starting this day out. It's on one of my favorite bodies of water. Though I had success at last year, and so we start the day out, and I step up on the back deck when we get there, and I'm stepping on the compartment lid on the side of the boat that I'm going to be fishing out of, and it starts cracking and breaking. Now I'm really starting to freak out. So now all I can think about it in my mind is I'm going to break an ankle, a leg, I'm going to fall in. Something bad's going to happen.
You're going to need a tetanus shot by the end of the day.
Right. And it just led to a long, bad day. First 10 minutes of the tournament, I lose a 4.5 pound smallmouth. Basically because I was paranoid and kind of half kneeling on my knees because I was afraid to stand up and fall through this boat. But according to bass rules, you have to be on the back deck when you're casting and fishing. You can go up front or in the middle of the boat if you need to get untangled or to land the fish. You can go anywhere in the boat to land the fish, but when you're actually in the act of fishing and casting, you have to be on the back deck. Well, this back deck is not safe to be fishing on. So it made for a very long bad day. I did not have a good finish that day. I was not happy, but it happens. I mean, I get it. You get some young guys that are desperate and they're trying to reach a dream, and I'm the same way. I'm not rich. And this is becoming a rich man's sport. You're doing whatever you can to get there and have the opportunity. And unfortunately, not every boat is a brand new boat, I guess.
Was it brand new carpet and $50,000 worth of electronics up front? Please tell me it was.
The front deck was had been redone a couple times. You could tell the front deck area had been restored. The middle to the back deck of the boat hasn't been touched, cleaned, or worried about in probably 20 years.
Wow. Jesus, that makes me want to open like both live well lids and stand in the live well. I'll
just have wet feet all day.
Yeah, just the fish can swim around my legs, man. That's just part of it.
Yeah.
So now there's been a couple questions on here after we've talked about this story. What was there anything said to officials or anything like that after that tournament, or did you just kind of let it go and blow it off?
I let it go for a couple weeks, to be honest, and I did call the director, Hank, and I did not want to do anything like protesting or anything like that. I basically called him just to ask what my options were if I ever had that situation happen again.
Yeah.
And got all that clarified, and I was good with that. I can remember being young and feeling like I didn't have the option to buy a better boat. I took better care of my boats. I never let my boats get in that situation, but I can understand. I mean, it's an expensive sport. It's easy to go broke in this sport when you're chasing this dream, and
yeah, but there's a lot to be said. You make if that individual makes the elites next year, the money
he can't fish out of that boat.
No.
Well, the money doesn't just start falling out of the sky for you. And
right.
Boat deals don't just come down the line.
Right.
So.
And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions out there. When Bass changed the rules this year heading into 2023 on how you can qualify for the elites, you used to be able to fish any of the 3 divisions. And if you won a division or were in the top 3, you could qualify for the elites. And now that's all gone away. And the only way to qualify is in the overall top 9 places at the end of the season. You have to fish all 9 to qualify for the elites now. And there's quite a bit of uproar over that. But I agree with it because if you can't fish 9 opens, the reality is you can't fish the elite circuit either. You don't just automatically get rich and everybody's jumping at you to pay for everything for you. It's just as tough to get started and get going and earn your way at the elite level as well.
There's a lot easier ways to make a buck, I promise.
Yes. Yeah,
but
this isn't it's not an easy dream to accomplish, and 95% of guys that have chased this dream have gone broke. That's the reality.
I had a boater one time on Kentucky Lake that nothing like what you're talking about, but he had this trolling motor issue where every time we made this long run, we put it in at the dam and we made a run all the way down by Blood River, I think. So pretty significant, like 30-minute run, probably something like that. And first thing he does is when we shut down on pad and we were fishing ledges, he shuts down, walks up to the front of the deck, and then he opens his rod locker and he grabs his hammer out, grabs his ball peen hammer and a little punch.
Yep.
And he taps this little screw or pin.
There's a pin up
there. Yeah.
It's a fairly common problem.
Then he puts it back in and we fish. And so each time we shut down after running, Kentucky Lake's rough, right?
Yeah.
Before he even grabs a rod, he steps up on the front deck and he opens the rod locker and he grabs his little hammer and tink, 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 tink. And this has been an ongoing. It's
a
such a problem that he kept a hammer and a punch in his boat, right? That's just part of his tools. And so one time, right towards the end of the day, he grabs that hammer, pulls up his trolling motor, and the whole thing just goes in the water. Like
wow.
It had come loose from the mount, the pin had come out. So then we didn't know what we were gonna do. We're like, what are we gonna do? He starts looking around in his rod lockers and his back.
So they ripped the wires and everything out?
Whatever I don't know
Did
what
he get it back?
No, it was still attached to his
okay.
It was still attached to his plug-in. I think he had one of those plug-ins.
So the plug-in saved him.
It was in the water and it was just dangling there. So he got it back, but then he's like, how am I going to keep it attached to the boat? Because we're running, it's going to be flopping all over the place.
Right. And as a co-angler, I'm thinking, how am I going to catch this trolling motor when it comes back and lands in my lap?
Takes my head off.
He put it under the rod straps.
Yeah, he's looking, and I was like, do you got a belt on? And he pulls up, and he's got pants on. It's the summertime. He's like, yeah, I got a belt. I'm like, well, figure out a way to secure that thing with a belt. So he literally took his belt off and used his belt to strap down his trolling motor. And we kind of limped through the rest of the day, but you never know what's going to happen when you get out in the water.
No, you don't. And I had another one this year at the James River tidal fishery, where you go out of there. A lot of the fish are caught up to Chickahominy. Well, it's like a 50-mile run to get up to the Chick from where they take off all the big tournaments. And halfway into the run, the first morning of the tournament, my pro's motor blew.
Ugh.
We're stranded out there in the middle of the river, and we were in the first 25% of the field. So you got boats running 70 miles an hour trying to race to their first spot all around you. And we ended up, the only thing we could do was drop the trolling motor, get to a creek, and we fished where we got stranded, and I got lucky and was able to catch 3 small keepers to salvage the day, but we never got to the good water. And then I had to call Chris to come pick us up, and so I could take our fish back in at the end of the day, because we had no motor to get back.
Yeah. So how does that work? You have to be able to identify each angler's fish, right? I mean, obviously.
Yep.
So
we had to bag them up. Luckily, between the 2 boats, we had 2 bags. Put his fish in a bag, put my fish in a bag, and I went with the fish, and he stayed with the boat.
Okay.
So I went up and weighed his fish first, and then weighed my fish.
Yeah, I've had that happen one time, but it wasn't because of a blown motor. I've had the motor issues a couple times. I remember fishing with Kenny McGar one time. We ran all the way down south by Jonathan Creek there, and then his boat wouldn't go over 8 miles an hour. I don't know what was going on. So we ran however many miles that was, 8 miles an hour.
Oh,
we spent it was a couple hour run. We'd stop and fish for a little bit,
just get bored,
and then we'd take off. But another time we were fishing on Barkley, and we weren't probably 1,000 yards from takeoff, and it was just a channel swing there in the little river. And we were working this 200-yard stretch back and forth all day long. And we had about 10 minutes to weigh in. We tried to fire the motor up, and it was dead. And we could see where we needed to go, but we couldn't get there.
Right.
And we were one of the later flights, so there wasn't a lot of boats coming in. They'd already weighed in. And some guy, we flagged somebody down, and they came over, and my boater, we transferred the fish. My boater ran in, got it done, and came back and got the boat a little bit later. And it's one of those deals where we were going to take the trolling motor batteries, use it for a starter battery, but he couldn't get them undone. They were like, it's like he took a torque wrench and tightened the nuts on there. But
no, I've had a lot happen this year. Heck, at Ross Barnett, funny story. Day 1, I drew Kyle Cortiana. Awesome guy, a lot of fun, very successful fisherman. We got stuck in he got us stuck in a backwater area. And we couldn't get out, and he literally had to jump in, and we had to call and get it cleared, because you're allowed to get out of the boat to get yourself out, you can't get out of the boat to get yourself into a fishing area. We were already in trying to get out. So he had to get out in the muck with the alligators. And I was using a push pole on the back of the boat, and it took us an hour to get the boat because the water was dropping every day. And it took us an hour of hard work to get us out of there.
That's a big, heavy object
Yeah,
to
those
push
glass
out of the
boats are
mud.
heavy.
Yeah. It was not fun. Arms and legs felt like jello afterwards. It was hard to fish properly afterwards. I mean,
well, for the first probably 15, 20 minutes, adrenaline's still pumping in your veins, and you're good to go. And then all of a sudden,
we were spent. So yeah, I've had a lot of crazy stuff happen, but it's all made for good fun, good experiences. But overall, on the co-angling thing, my best advice would be finesse is your friend. 90% of the time, just catching keepers is going to get you paid more times than not. You know, yeah, we all want to catch that big bag. And it's hard for me because I've never been a co-angler since I started fishing after my first year in a local club. Once I bought my first boat at 17 and I've never looked back. And so co-angling is actually very tough for me. It's been hard for me to switch my mindset to that side of things, but consistency, catching fish. Hang on a second, I let my dog out.
You're good.
I like Russ's comment here. He said the co-angler's job is to lay on the trolling motor while running down the lake. I mean, yeah, we're the utility guy in the boat. We do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Russ's comment there. So, are you seeing the comments on your side?
As you're popping them up, I don't have I couldn't get my computer to work, so I'm doing this on my phone, so I don't get to see quite as much. But when you pop them up, I can see them.
You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
Excellent.
Yeah, Chris had the comment a while ago about after fishing 9 events, he's got enough gas money for the first opens, and I know he's joking about that, but I mean it's the truth. I mean you're not out there to make a bunch of money. You're out there for one goal and one goal only, and that's to make the Elite Series.
Right. So. And I mean, truth be told, the way I'm doing it, so there's 2 ways to approach co-angling. You know, the cheapest way is just to show up the day of registration and go fishing for 2 days. It costs a lot of money to do what I'm doing. And when you fish all week practicing, you're sharing hotels and gas and food and everything else, it's very expensive. I'll be honest with you. I won co-angler of the year and I lost money this year. And that's the reality of it. And I had, I cashed 4 out of 9 tournaments, had 2 top 5s, top 14, 28th, and I lost money this year. That's the reality. But you don't have to take on the extra expenses that I did. But, you know, my average, especially living here in Iowa, my average travel time was 15, 16 hours to most of these events. And
yeah,
it's a lot of gas expense, a lot of time. But I went into it for the bigger picture of I was just relearning lakes or learning new lakes and getting the experience of how to practice and prepare for these opens. Because most people don't realize, you know, you see the elites, you see the BBT, and those guys are only fishing against 90 people. These opens and Toyotas and stuff, there's 200 to 225 boats, and it's actually a lot tougher to be successful at these AAA levels, I guess you would call it, these qualifying levels, the opens, Toyotas and whatnot. It's actually harder because there's just as good a fishermen as there are already at the top level. Plus those guys are coming down and cherry picking a lot of these tournaments. But it's actually a lot tougher to be successful at this level than it is once you get to the top level. You're fishing more than double the competition, and you're fishing against a lot of local hot dogs as well.
And it practices too. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of those guys have been practicing for a week or
Right.
two.
The lakes
Or
are getting
3.
pounded, and that's one of the
Yeah.
rules that got changed this year. You know, there's a lot of guys that just travel from lake to lake, so they're practicing for 2, 3, 4 weeks sometimes.
Right.
And
What was that rule change as far as practicing?
so now it's going to be cut down to it's off limits for a month, and there's a 5-day official practice period, I believe it is.
I like that. I like that.
Which is closer to the elites. Part of getting you prepared for the elites. I like it. The lakes will fish better because when the lakes take that much pounding for a month before the tournament, the bite gets brutal. I mean, the fish get educated, they're getting pounded. It gets tough. And so I like that. I think that's a good change.
So what's Cory Weaver's plan for next year?
So part of winning the co-angler of the year, I'm still waiting on a call back from Hank. Basically, you win 3 entries into next season that I can use on the pro side. I can pick one division that I want to fish on the pro side, or I can use it on the co-angler side again, is my understanding at this point. I'm still waiting to get all the specifics. So I don't know. There's a lot. Part of me wants to fish all 9, but family-wise, financial-wise, I don't know that I'm ready to do that yet. I am going to fish at least the 3. I've also considered fishing some Toyotas and BFLs. The Ozark region's only 4 hours away from me. I got quite a bit of experience down there. So I might, one of the options is I might fish 3 opens and then fish some of the BFL Ozark divisions and maybe some Toyotas. Or if sponsorships that I'm working on work out, I might go all in and fish all 9 opens and just go for that. A lot to be determined yet in a short amount of time because unfortunately you don't get a lot of turnaround time. There'll be everything starts in November already, mid to late November. You got to start paying your deposits and commitments, and so that's not a lot of time to work on sponsors and knock on doors and
No.
sell yourself. So
There's not a lot of grass to cut this time of the year to make that payment for next year. So
no.
Well, I know there's a Toyota on Lake of the Ozarks, and they're bringing the Toyota back to Kentucky Lake next year. Yep. It's been
Well, and the
years.
opens are coming to the Ozarks in September as well.
Okay.
And that'll probably be the division that I pick. Not that I'm a hammer by any means at the Ozarks, but I at least have quite a bit of experience there. The
Russ
most
says
experience out of any of the lakes.
If you fish the BFLs, will you be fishing as a co-angler?
No. If I fish the BFLs, it'll be on the boater side.
Here's a question I was going to ask you. What is your favorite tournament lake to fish, or some of your top lakes, some of your favorite lakes from this year or in the past?
I tell you, from the Open so far, my 2 favorites are probably, well, it's hard. It's hard. So we went to Kissimmee Chain to start the year, which should be flat out awesome, but we got there and it snowed and had freezing weather for the first 4 days we were there.
And lizards falling out of trees.
Yeah. So it didn't fish as well as it normally would. But I tell you, my 2 favorites so far out of the last 2 years, I fished Oneida twice now, and Oneida is kind of a hidden gem. It's gotten gobies in it the last, half dozen years or so, and those smallmouth are growing every bit as big as they do at the St. Lawrence and all the big places. The fishing at Oneida is pretty incredible. Plus the walleye population is awesome, so you can eat walleye every night.
Yeah.
grocery bill's pretty cheap because you can have fish fries every night there. The fishing's incredible. So Oneida's a lot of fun, and the James River tidal system, that place is a lot of fun. There's a lot of big fish, a lot of power fishing. It's right in my wheelhouse, what I like to do. James River was a lot of fun, but I enjoy fishing everywhere. I enjoy the challenge of learning and breaking down new bodies of water and figuring out how to solve that puzzle. So,
do you have a?
It's hard to beat the St. Lawrence River.
Yeah.
If you don't like catching big smallmouth like that, there's something wrong with you.
I tell you what, it's my least favorite tournament to watch, though.
Yeah, it can be. Live scopes kind of changed.
To watch awful.
Live scopes kind of changed the fun of watching fishing in certain events. That's for sure.
Until they figure out how to show like what the pro is looking at.
That's going to happen.
Right. And it's going to happen. There's going to be a little module that they plug into the back of their unit, and it's going to live stream to the viewers at home, and they can talk their way right through it.
Absolutely. But it's not 100% live scope fishing there. You can have a lot of fun, a lot of success there, not live scoping, but it's definitely hard to beat.
Right.
You ever been to Mille Lacs?
Yep.
Yeah, I like Mille Lacs. I've only been there once, but it's
I go to Mille Lacs quite a bit. I'll go up there several times a year ice fishing for walleye, and I go up there several times for smallmouth trips too. So
yeah. Are you familiar with Garrison?
I have not fished Garrison. I know of it, but
okay. Yeah. That's where we were staying at. I was wondering if you've eaten at the Spotlight Cafe, but if you haven't been to Garrison, you haven't eaten at the Spotlight Cafe.
No. I usually stay over. It's not far from there, actually. I forget the name of that little place that we go to, but Garrison's on the west side, isn't it?
Yeah, it'd be on the. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure.
Yeah, I usually stay on the
southeast
side. I usually stay on the southeast side at the place that we stay at. But
is that down by the Isle? What's it called? Isle? You familiar with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it the Isle River that comes
I don't want to mess up my phone or I'd look it up, but
that's all right, man.
But yeah, no, I stay at a place there in the southeast corner, and because basically you can go ramp anywhere once you're there. I kind of base where I ramp out of based on the weather, the wind. Just because I stay on the southeast side doesn't necessarily mean that's where I fish, but yeah. So a lot of them bodies of water, you gotta play the wind, and
oh yeah, 100%. That's what we did when we were up there. Whichever side the wind was not blowing on, that's where we put in at. That's just what you got to do over there. It's a big lake, big lake. JP says, what were some key baits for Cory at the James River?
So they were getting ready and starting to spawn already when we were there. And I had a lot of luck with some jigs and spinner baits, but actually my key baits during the tournament, I ended up power shotting, drop shotting most of my fish on a little bit heavier setup than normal. I call it power shotting. Just give them something different to look at that 200 boats weren't already doing, and
yeah,
I had a lot of success doing it.
It's hard to compete with 400 anglers when they've already thrown everything but the kitchen sink at them. So
yeah, and you're not, being a co-angler, they're not seeing your bait first, right. No matter where you're going. So yeah, so I came up with a little game plan, power shotting for these fish, and you know, a lot of the fishing is either up around the pads or around cypress trees, and I just figured out where I could get bites that the boaters were kind of overlooking or not targeting first, and had a lot of success with it.
Cool. Well, we'll ask you a couple more questions here and wrap this up.
Yeah.
I got to go to the bathroom real quick. But I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to walk away.
That's all right.
Some of the baits that you leaned on this year, you know, I don't know, top 3, top 5 baits or something that you feel like every co-angler should have, or that were one of the keys to your success this year out there on the tour. And I'm listening, but I won't be in the picture.
That's all right. So that I would recommend people learn on. If you wanted to be the best co-angler or the most consistent co-angler out there, you would throw a wacky rig, a drop shot, a shaky head, and a little 3-inch Kayak or finesse swim bait.
Right.
I think that would give anybody the most consistency throughout the entire year. Do I follow my own advice necessarily? No. I can't take the boater side out of me sometimes. But I've had a lot of success with the drop shot, with the small swim baits. I throw a jig a lot. That's my confidence bait. I feel like I can catch fish on a jig anywhere in the country, and whether I'm in front or behind the boat, I can figure out how to catch them on a jig. It might be a football jig, bomb casting it way out deep while my guy's up shallow, or different things like that. But I lean a lot on a jig certain times of year. Sometimes it's just about covering water. Bladed jigs, spinner baits, buzz baits, stuff like that. But a lot of it's based really on what my boater's doing and what I can do differently and take advantage of the same area.
I would agree on that we all have a confidence bait, whether it is a shaky head, whether it is a jig, like in your situation.
Right.
I was the same way. I feel like I can catch a jig in front or behind, a fish on a jig in front or behind people.
Yeah.
In most situations, whether it's summer, winter, spring, or fall.
Yeah.
But having your confidence bait. But I think more importantly, you know, you went into this co-angling adventure to learn, right?
Yeah.
And I think what co-angling taught me as a tournament angler is when to cut bait with confidence, or when to cut bait with what you got normally going. And as a boater, being able to go, you know what, I just need to put a limit in the boat right now. What can I do to do that? And that's usually a shaky head, a small swim bait, something super finesse that I can put, you know, get my limit back together, 2 or 3 fish that I need within the last 2 hours of the tournament. So
right. And Chris gives me crap at every tournament because if you guys seen how I travel, so I basically take a tackle shop and fill up my trunk. I only take a small backpack. I got a small backpack bag that I use. But behind the scenes in preparation, my entire trunk is full of a tackle shop, and I'm experimenting and trying anything and everything out there all week long. And I've got 9 to 12 rods in the boat, and Chris is shaking his head at me like, you're an idiot. Bring 3 rods and accept being a co-angler for now and do the smart thing and just throw your co-angler baits. And
well, you should tell him to take all his rods out of his locker and just put 5 rods in his rod locker in his boat.
He gets annoyed because I throw rods in his rod lockers. But come tournament time, I whittle it down. I usually take 6 rods, and it's usually at least 2 or 3 spinning rods. Depends.
You
the
just
lake
got called out. I'm
conditions.
sorry. You just got called out. He said small backpack.
Well, it might weigh 80 pounds. No,
Yeah.
it's packed full, but it
It's like
fits
the-
inside a compartment. And I would
It's like
say
my
that's
co-angler backpack. I got these little duffel bags that I can like carabiner onto my backpack. So my
Right.
backpack's only, a small backpack, but
Yeah.
I can fit all kinds of stuff.
That's
on
like
that.
the Postal Service priority box where it fits at ships.
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he gives me crap and says all I need to bring is a fanny pack, and I should just wear a fanny pack at every tournament, have 3 bags of baits in there for each one of my spinning rods, and
There
call
you
it.
go. Have your sponsors on your fanny pack.
We talked about that. So like one Plano when we were co-angling together,
We dared each other.
we
to do this.
would never do it, but like one Plano 3700,
And one rod. We were
And
going to
one-
do like one
rod, one box. That
Yep.
was it.
Just fish a BFL like that just to see what would happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, truth be told, if you go through and research the history, I mean, you'd be surprised how many guys out there that are truly technically professional co-anglers that have won hundreds of thousands of dollars fishing the Toyotas and
Brian
everything
News, one of
else.
them.
And every one of them, 90% of the time, are throwing 1 or 2 spending rods most of the time.
Yep. I know a guy on Kentucky Lake who's really good. Well, 2 guys. One guy, if there's a jig bite, he's gonna get a check for sure as a co-angler. And the other guy is a Carolina rig guy. That's what they throw. They pretty much throw a jig or a Carolina rig, and they do.
And that's what I would say. I mean, if you're going to throw your bait casters, the Carolina rigs, a jig, if you're good at fishing a jig and have confidence in a jig, and then maybe 1 rod for moving baits, whether it be square bill, spinner baits, crank baits, whatever your confidence is. But if you want to consistently cash checks, keep a spinning rod in your hand. Most of the time, all you need is your limit, and it doesn't matter the size of your limit because it's going to add up, especially on multi-day events. If you're fishing 2-day events, not quite so much on single-day events like the BFLs. I mean, a lot of times you need to have a good fish in the BFLs. From what little bit I've researched it, but still having your limit is way more important than trying to fish for big fish. It's hard to fish for big fish out of the back of the boat, but a lot of guys don't want to accept or understand that.
It's hard to do. It truly is.
Especially at the Opens and the Toyota Series level. I mean, sometimes in the BFL, you draw somebody that's not real proficient at maybe pitching or something. And if you're in the back of the boat and you can slide your stuff in there nice, you may have a better opportunity to catching some of those bigger fish. Because a lot of times the bigger fish gets plucked off before we get to them in the back of the boat.
Right.
Yeah. And so I've fished 13 Opens now, which means I've been paired up with 26 pros. And I've been fortunate enough. So there was a question earlier about, how much luck is involved in who you draw and if they're around fish or not. Well, in 13 events, 26 pros, I've outfished 16 out of the 26 pros I've drawn. So you can't blame it on your pro wasn't on fish, your pro wasn't on water. There's still ways to find to catch fish, no matter how good or bad your pro's doing.
Right.
It doesn't matter how good they are. They're going to have tough days too. And there's going to be days that they have good days and you never get a chance to reach those fish. And that's just the reality.
Yeah. Here's a question here. It's been floating around. What's Cory's thoughts on making live scope just for practice? Does he think that would be a good idea to level the playing field so no one makes the excuse that someone has an advantage during the tournament day?
No. I'm very much a technology guy. Because to me, where can you say you can draw the line? To me, 360 is just as valuable as live scope. I can have just as much success, I feel like, using 360 as live scope. There's a lot of tournaments that live scope doesn't even come into play. Unfortunately, some of the bodies of water that are televised and stuff a lot, it seems like that's the only thing that's in play. But the reality is it's not. Side imaging, just as valuable, just as important in finding and locating fish or key spots. Where do we draw the line? Why is one thing? I mean, we're fishing at $100,000 boats now. We're using $300 to $1,000 plus rods. There's baits out there that cost hundreds of dollars. Where do we draw the line? Why is this one thing such an issue?
I think it's the new hotness, right?
Right.
It's just something new, and it's easy to target.
But yeah. I also believe, I mean, at some point there does have to come a limit. Are we literally going to be watching a live screen TV and literally watching a real live picture of the fish in our bait? And I mean, we're already getting close to that, but yeah, I don't have an answer. I don't know what the right answer is for that. I'm 100% not against live scope. I enjoy live scoping. But I also know that a lot of stuff I do doesn't involve live scope. There are still old school techniques and ways are still very prevalent today. This is just the hot button issue, and there's definitely two sides of the fence on it.
Yeah, I think that you know,
if you don't have one, you hate them.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
I mean, you're a fan. If you're like me, I'm on either side. It's not going to hurt my feelings if they do ban it someday, but I'm not in favor of banning it.
Of the 26 pros that you fished with, how many of them had some sort of forward-facing sonar?
Of the 26, probably, I'd say at least 20.
Okay. So,
but that doesn't mean all 20 of them used them.
Right. But let's just say 75% of the people fishing in the Opens or the Elites or the Toyota Series or the BPT or the Pro Circuit have that technology. They're still not winning because they have that technology. You still got to know when to use that and when to lose it.
The guys that were winning before are still winning.
You got to know the basics
because of their skills, not because of live scope. It's just another tool.
I mean, look at John Cox.
Right.
John Cox hasn't fished deeper than 5 foot of water in 3 years now.
Or Keith Poche.
And makes a damn good living on the Elites. Keith Poche and his little 10 rig. Yeah, he's got the big boat. And there's been some stuff about him using the little boat. But I got mad respect for it because I tell you what, he showed up to every single tournament in that little 10 boat.
Yeah.
And it was a disadvantage more times than it was an advantage.
I was going to say, nobody said anything about him when he was up north on big water.
Right. Or even like this week at Sam Rayburn, there's 5-6 footers out there a couple days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get out there in that little 10 rig and tell me that he's using it to his advantage. No, he's putting in the work and taking it on. He fished it in every single event, and I got mad respect for that.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, a lot of the people that complain about live scope don't have the technology on their boat and haven't experienced it. It's not a for sure deal. It'll lead you astray, especially right now. Like the other day when I was fishing, there's a definitely shallow water grass bite, and I was side scanning. I saw all these shad, and I put the live scope down, and I'm out in 25 feet of water, which can be productive this time of year. The fish will go deep just like they go shallow. But I'm out there for 45 minutes trying to cast at these fish that aren't going to bite. I should have just been running the bank and covering water.
Well, and that's the thing most people don't realize is how many fish it can actually be more of a hindrance and more frustrating how many fish you can see and you have your bait in the perfect position and they don't bite. Live scope doesn't make them bite.
Nope.
Does it give you better opportunities? To me, the greatest thing about live scope is how much you can learn about fish behavior now. how much you can learn about what triggers a fish and what doesn't trigger a fish. Now we're learning how far fish will truly follow a bait and still never commit to it. Or
I can hit the brush pile on every single cast.
Right.
I don't have to cast.
I can do that with 360 too.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
But it's still forward facing. It's still something
Right.
that you're seeing out there.
Yeah.
But before I had any of that, it was like, okay, there's my waypoint. I'm pointed at it with the boat at least. I'm close.
Right.
But
I mean, for
I'm still
years
gonna
I
miss
was
it.
throwing a buoy. I was going over 2D in. Oh, there's the brush pile. There's the rock pile. I'm throwing a buoy over the side of the boat and then going back, positioning the boat and fishing it, picking the buoy back up and starting all over again.
Yep.
But I mean, let's be honest. We got boats. We can run over 120 miles now in a tournament day and still be efficient, fishing time wise. Things are different. Things are advanced, just like the rest of our lives.
I think that's what's a great part about our sport of fishing is you got guys that can run a 22-foot Ranger, 22-foot deep V boat all throughout the entire open season. And you got guys that are like Keith Poche, John Cox that can run a 17-foot 10 rig all over the country.
Well, Cox has got 20-foot 10 rig.
True. But you got both ends of the spectrum. There's no and you can debate this till we're all three blue in the face, but there's no consistency. It's your option what you want to use as your tools.
Right.
If you're a DeWalt guy, you're a Milwaukee guy, whatever analogy you want to use, you can use it. But that's the great thing about the sport. You fish whatever you're comfortable fishing with, whether it's Garmin, Lowrance, Humminbird, whether it's a 10 rig or it's a 22-foot Ranger.
Right. And I'm getting ready to go through that right now. The hardest decision I have to make this year is what boat I'm going to run, and am I going to buy a new boat or am I going to risk another used boat for a couple of years?
Hopefully somebody doesn't fall through the back deck, but
right. No, it won't be that bad of a used boat. I can promise you that. But working out, I still got a lot to prove and a lot of sponsors to work on, but nobody's giving away free boats anymore. So I'm working on some boat deals, but what people think boat deals are these days and what they are in reality are way far apart.
Yeah, you're not getting them for 10 grand. I promise you that.
Yeah, we're buying it. We're in the market for a new vehicle. Our vehicle, we decided to get rid of it because the transmission went out. And yeah, it's a surprise. It's not a time to be buying much of anything right now. No. Even groceries, gas, vehicles, houses, everything's.
I mean, even that side of my life, I have never bought a brand new vehicle in my life.
I never have either.
I bought the wife a couple new vehicles sometimes, but I have never bought a brand new vehicle.
Yep.
And
happy wife, happy life.
I probably never will.
I won't even buy my wife a new one.
Well, as much money and time as I spend chasing this crazy dream and the sport,
not a bad idea.
There's very little that I say no to my wife to about. I can promise you that. Because I owe her a ton of thanks and gratitude for putting up with me and letting me do this and putting up with me, period, let alone this side of me.
Right. I think we all of us married men can say that same thing.
Right.
I mean, it takes a team, man.
Our wives put up with a lot. I mean,
yeah.
I hear it all the time, and I'm sure both of you do too. I get home on the weekends from fishing, and I hear the stories about her friends are like, how can you stand to let him go to the lake all weekend long? And she's like, I don't know any different. Like, he's been doing that for the 14 years that we've been together.
Well, truth be told, they enjoy that break away from us just as much as we do. They won't ever say it or admit it, but they look forward to those breaks.
Absolutely. Until the kids start acting up and the kids are bad, and then it's your fault. But
yeah.
We're not
Mine
gonna
are
go
older
there.
now, so I don't have to worry about that so much. But
I got 8 and 3, so I'm right in the mix of it.
yeah.
Last, Rich wants to know. He's asked this question a couple times. What lakes do you fish in Iowa?
In Iowa, so
Yeah.
I'm in central Iowa, not too far from the Des Moines Metro. So we got a lot of little lakes around here. Big Creek, Rathburn, 12-mile, 3-mile, Green Valley, quite a few lakes. Clear Lake up north, Okoboji and Spirit Lake, which is considered our Great Lakes. They're our biggest lakes in the state, up in the northwest corner. I've only been there once. And then we got the Mississippi River over on the Wisconsin border. A lot of big tournaments go out of that area. But now that I'm jumping back into this game, I don't get to fish locally as much as I'd like to, because I'm dedicating so much time to preparing to make this jump and make one more run at this before I get too old to do this anymore.
So would you? I probably already know the answer to this, but if you were to fish all night events, open and qualify for the Bassmaster Elites, is that something that's in your future? I mean, are you leaning that way? Is that the ultimate goal?
That's the ultimate goal. But truth be told, am I ready for that yet? No. I'm not. People don't understand the true costs behind this game and behind this sport. You can think you're ready, but I promise you 90% of them out there that think they're ready aren't ready.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, just look at the elites now. There's a half a dozen or more guys every year behind the scenes that no one sees or hear about that fall out and don't finish the season because they run out of money. And that's just the reality.
I remember listening to it. I don't remember who it was, but they were talking that they had saved enough money. They had calculated throughout the year what they were going to spend on the Elite Series. And they blew that in the first 2 tournaments.
Yeah.
Was it Morgan Taylor had a story? Chad Morgan Taylor had a story.
Yeah, that's who it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had amassed enough money to make it through like 1 or 2 years. And they were dwindling down very quickly.
Yeah, after two or three tournaments.
And several guys have done some great interviews and articles, like Carl Jacobson having to requalify or just trying to get there. How many times he went broke and had to start all over and thought his dream was done, and the amount of credit cards that guys max out. And I mean, you really can put yourself and your family in terribly bad situations if you're not careful chasing this dream. It's a hard balance. That's a hard balance.
We'll ask this one more question, then we'll wrap this thing up.
All right.
Rush Williams says he will be fishing his first BFL next year in the Ozark division as a co-angler. How much have you learned from fishing with the pros? We've kind of been touching on that, but anything to add to that?
A ton, honestly. I'm kind of a student, a studier. I think about things differently. Even like, I feel like a lot of YouTube videos and channels out there, I feel like most people miss the true good details available out there. Like, most people want to know what's the hot bait or what's the spot on the lake or the generic obvious stuff, where my brain thinks in ways of what made that spot so good. I don't care about that spot itself, but what made that so good in that situation? How can I duplicate that somewhere else in a similar situation, whether it be that lake or somewhere else? I think the more you open your mind up and ask better questions to yourself that are actually beneficial, instead of just what's the hot color, what's the hot bait, what's the spot. I think there's a lot more information to be learned You know, why did this guy stick with this pattern so long, or why did he change so fast? Decision making on when to move, not to move, compared to how my brain works. There's so many things you can learn and pick up on. It's an endless opportunity if that's what you're truly trying to do.
That's Chris's tip. Let's bring a fanny pack and 3 rods.
I hear it every week.
Yeah. Adding on to what you just said, like, don't look at the places like as a waypoint. Try to look at it as, why are the fish there? What's bringing those fish to that area? That's something that, like Lake of the Ozarks, you're talking about fishing the Ozark division next year, possibly. You got 60,000 docks on Lake of the Ozarks, give or take 10,000. Why are fish on one dock and they're not on the other dock? Well, most of the time it's what's underneath the dock. What's the bottom of the lake look like? That's what's holding those fish on that dock
on that particular day.
Yeah, and so you shouldn't be like, okay, I'm going to fish the blue dock next time.
What's the water current situation? What's the water level situation? There's so many factors that people don't think about. The timing of the shade, the timing of the sun angle. There's so many keys that people don't even take the time to think about that truly affect the big picture of it.
That's the science of bass fishing. That's why no matter how many years we're chasing this, we'll never master it, because it's always moving. It's
evolving.
It's an organic organism. It's just always moving and flowing.
You know, in a place like the Ozarks, if you want, I mean, you can run out of gas twice on that lake if you want.
Oh yeah,
and still not get back home.
Yeah,
right. So I mean, there's a lot of water, a lot to break down. Is it worth it? Run? Is it necessary to run? Can I get back if I do run? Because especially during the wrong time of year with all them party boats out there, do you want to be climbing 7, 8 foot wake boat waves out there, trying to get back with? There's a lot of decisions that go into it.
Yeah, what's more important, breaking all your stuff or trying to catch a few fish? You know,
right?
That lake is rowdy. You're exactly right.
Yep.
Well, we'll wrap this up, man. It's been a couple hours, and it was cool to hang out with you, man. It's good to meet you for the first time, and good
absolutely,
luck
I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
Congratulations on a great season.
Huge congratulations, man. That's quite the feat.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Anything else you want to touch on before we go?
Any
sponsors, shout outs, anything like that?
Yeah, sponsor shout outs. JB's Fish Sauce, my fish attractant company. Love for you guys to come check it out. Black Magic's our #1 seller. Chris Boudry, our pro that's been on here heckling me all night.
Fanny pack.
He'll make a believer out of you in our Black Magic jelly. But we have a ton of different applications, ton of different scents for all different kinds of fishing, not just bass fishing. Amped Outdoors lithium batteries, another big sponsor of mine. Picasso Lures, Vicious Fishing line, iRod Fishing, make some of the best rods you can find, especially for the price point. Hayabusa fishing hooks. Norfin USA, my outdoor apparel and gear company. Calcos, Tackle Works Tackle, Jurassic Plastics, Saki Fishing's a local buddy of mine that does all my custom rods or rod repair work. Awesome local company here. It's got a ton of tackle, especially now gearing up for ice season. Makes all my custom ice rods. I always forget people. Jurassic Plastics. And if I forgot anybody, I'm sorry. But Backyard Bait Shop, he makes some custom jigs and some custom molds for me, and actually helped me seal the deal this week at Sam Rayburn. That old guy came through for me. Just had those made and came through. But other than that, no, thanks for everything. If people want to go on and follow me, I'd appreciate all the support. I got my Cory Weaver Outdoor page on Facebook. I'm just now starting to get into TikTok and going to try the YouTube thing. I'm not very technology savvy, so it's going to be a slow go at it. But in this day and age, in order to work with sponsors and stuff, you got to get those impressions going. So it's something I'm working on, going to get more going. Don't have a clue what I'm doing yet, but it's building, it's getting there. But I'd really appreciate it if people went and followed and supported. I enjoy it, I appreciate it, and look forward to see what the future holds.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'll leave I left linked to your Facebook page. I'll leave a link to your YouTube channel. And if you ever got any questions about the YouTube stuff, man, don't hesitate to give me a call. I've been doing it for a while. I'm definitely not a pro at it, but I kind of know the basic stuff. So yeah, I'd share whatever information I've learned with you for sure, because that's a huge part of it.
I'll have to get down there sometime, go have a little fun with you guys. I get by there quite a bit. I'll be heading down to Reelfoot next week, so I'll be passing by there. I get by there quite a bit. We'll have to link up sometime, have a little fun.
Let me know. I literally live less than a half a mile off of Interstate 55.
Yep.
So I'm right there. Yeah. Stay in touch.
Cool, guys. Well, I appreciate it. Have a good one. Keep up the great work. And I enjoy following and looking forward to talking with you guys again someday.
Yep. Awesome, man. Same here, and good luck next year.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Bye. See you guys.